So, up until taking this course this spring, I had no idea how much words and their usage impact my life. And after learning how words can grow through time, geography, pop culture, I've been able to see how language has evolved in my life. So, without further ado, I present to you my development of English. This is my family, and I'd like to think that they shaped my knowledge of language the most. The person in the middle taking the photo is my older sister, Avery. And while creating this project, Avery and I were able to reflect and laugh on how idioms, phrases, and even accents molded our perception of the English language as children. My mom, who's pictured to the left of Avery, and my dad, who's pictured in the back, really encouraged reading books and listening to music, which as a child, this really shaped my love and understanding of words, and later for poetry as a teenager. The roots of my development of English as a child, as a teenager, and later as an adult really stemmed from the upbringing by my parents. The two people on the left are my mother's parents, my gran and papa. My mom was raised in various parts of Texas for most of her life, such as Beaumont, Dallas, and later Houston, but gran and papa were from a small town in northeastern Louisiana called Rayville. I didn't realize that people pronounced the state as Louisiana and not Louisiana, as I had heard my family pronounce it as Louisiana for years. The picture on the right actually shows the street where my grand's family, the Gladneys, lived for many years, and a lot of my mom's extended family still lives over near this side of town. And when I visit them and I hang out around the Gladney Loop for too long, sometimes my southern drawl really comes out. And growing up around them, I've really increased my southern phrases and sayings from this side of the family. A lot of the idioms I heard as a child, and still hear when I call my mom from college, are sayings such as don't cut off your nose to spite your face, meaning don't overreact about small situations, or dead gummit as opposed to things like darn it, or worse, cussing in front of my mother. And when things wouldn't go as planned in my family or in my social life, my mom always said that dog won't hunt, which I've definitely said to some of my friends in college when a plan is bound to go amiss. These are my dad's parents. The woman on the left is my Mimi, and the man on the right is my grandpa. The picture below is the house in Quincy, Illinois that my grandpa lived in for many years, even when my dad was a child growing up. I included the geography of my grandparents because I have always associated language and development of language with setting. And when my family would go visit my grandpa in Quincy, I have memories of hearing words and phrases being used by parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins in that house specifically. A phrase that my dad used a lot in his life, and still uses, are that boat has sailed or that train has left the station, to refer to a missed opportunity of some kind. I hear and still use this phrase a lot as an adult. One of the phrases from my Mimi side of the family was to fly by the seat of your pants, which still makes me laugh to this day. It refers to making decisions as you go along, which is common for college students, so I may or may not have picked up that phrase from my dad, and I may or may not use it in various settings in college. I was raised going to church, and hearing biblical stories, songs, and proverbs also affected my perception of language much more than I realized before starting this project. The picture on the left is my church from home that I grew up going to for my entire life, St. Dunstan's Episcopal Church, and the picture on the right is my current church that I attend here at Texas State University, the Texas State United Campus Ministry. I mentioned earlier that poetry became one of my later loves in life as a teenager, and a worship song from my childhood that I adored was Divine Romance by Phil Wickham. The chorus reads, "For you I sing, I dance, rejoice in this divine romance, lift my heart and my hands to show my love, to show my love." And a chorus like this made me love language and the perception of language even more. And I included the pictures of the church to show how setting affected my development of English. A lyric like this could be used for interpretation in the church and can bring different feelings to different people. For me, it brought a positive affirmation from the church into a childhood song that I adored. And this was also the perfect example of how I grew to love poetry in my development of English later in life. In my teenage and later young adult years, books became a way for me to understand words in an artistic sense, and these were, and still are, my top 3 favorite books of all time. The first book on the left is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And reading this as a teenager, this was the first book that let me understand the concept of words as art, because I loved the way that Fitzgerald described settings and places and emotions. The book in the middle is White Teeth by Zadie Smith, who has quickly become one of my favorite authors in my college career, and Zadie Smith uses language as a way to show her reader how other people are affected by language by using themes such as multiculturalism in her novels. The book on the far right is Rest in the Morning by R.H. Sine, which is the very first poetry book I bought for myself. This was the first book that let me understand that poetry doesn't need a certain layout to be a poem. Poetry can be whatever you want it to be, as long as the reader feels it in a certain way that helps them understand it as poetry. And these were the books that helped me shape language as a perception, but also helped me understand that English doesn't always have borders, and the way that I understand English and the things that I read is different from the next person. Speaking of words as art, music had a huge influence on me and my perception of English starting from a very young age. Growing up, my parents always played country, to rock, to pop, to folk music, and I would hear words and phrases in the lyrics that allowed me to understand reading and writing tools such as metaphors and personification. A lot of the music that we as humans listen to in our developmental years, like as a teenager, have a huge influence on us, and while my current favorite genre of music is country, these are my top 3 favorite albums of all time. These are all folk albums, which to me has always accentuated the softness of lyrical poetry. All of these albums bring in that poetry concept that I've talked about so heavily throughout this project, and in my young and edgy teenage angst, I felt the lyrics to these songs so fervently in my teenage years. The album on the far left is Multiply by Ed Sheeran, who is my favorite singer of all time. The album in the middle is Crosby, Stills & Nash's self-titled album, and it's a folk rock album that was actually one of my mom's favorite albums as a child, and this was something that I grew up hearing a lot that really had an effect on my understanding of lyrics as art in my teenage years. The album on the right is Matt Carney's soft rock album, Just Kids, and this uses that metaphorical undertone to show how words and their meaning can really be poetry to those who listen to them. The tone in which we speak and the tone in which we hear our entertainment also has a big effect on our development of English. So for me personally, I watched things with dry humor, especially as a young adult. A lot of commonalities in the movies and the TV shows of like the 90s and the 2000s was that dry, sarcastic humor, which is attributed to my favorite movie, Napoleon Dynamite, and my favorite show, That 70s Show. This is a perception of how I see humor, and I can use my sarcasm and dry humor and my just weird, goofy side. A lot of that is attributed to the things that I watched growing up on TV. My development of English is still developing, and I am using words now that had a completely different meaning to me a few years ago. As you can tell by these pictures, I started off my senior year of college in a mask because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So words like quarantine, or now, more recently, vaccine, have taken on a brand new connotation for me and the rest of the world. And phrases like 6 feet apart or mask up have instigated a new meaning that I can only associate with COVID safety. The development of English here is not just my development of English. We can see now that language and meaning is an ever-changing concept that is present in everyone in today's society. In more recent years, social media has perpetuated the development of English in exponential ways, with acronyms like LOL and OMG that are used in text and sometimes for middle school Allie in real conversation, which is super embarrassing. But now, meme culture and internet slang have cultivated a brand new English for me and other people in my generation. And it hasn't stopped there, because it's still an ever-changing idea, since English is never stagnant. The language is constantly evolving and changing meaning, and social media has attributed to that for me and the culture of many other people. English is constantly changing. It's never stagnant, and it flows like a river each and every day. Because of that, the way that we think, speak, read, write, and interact with the world around us is constantly changing too. While this project may be over, the development of English is not, and I encourage you to get out in the world and see how your development of English has shaped the world around you.